this picture has actually 4 strings with different colors. So what do you think when it comes to teaching English? What do you think, what responses do you have in your mind when you look at this picture? So this picture has actually 4 colors, just like we have 4 skills in English language teaching. So the first skill is, yes, absolutely correct, 4 skills of language. Wow, what a good response. Yeah, so 4 skills in English language, good. So now I have started receiving all the responses. Yes, so each, if you look at the picture closely, each skill is separate. So what are those skills? First, let's just look at those. Can anybody tell me what are those 4 skills when we teach English? So those 4 skills are actually reading. Yes, absolutely. Writing, very good. Yeah. Speaking, very good. Good job. And the last one is listening. Yes. So there are like 4 skills. And in today's session, we'll be covering speaking. But if you look at the picture, just like, each string has a different color. So similarly in the English language, each skill has its own merits. And at the same time, they're not separate from one another. They're closely linked while being separate at the same time. So this is how the English language works. So let's just move on to the next step. Consider the sub-skills of speaking. So what are those sub-skills? Anybody can tell me what comes into your mind when we talk about the sub-skills of speaking? I hope all of you have been teaching and, you have your good responses. What do you think the sub-skills of speaking are? Accent, okay. And you can just simply type it in. You do not need to raise your hand. Vocabulary, I guess. Okay. Tenses, grammar, yeah. And what? Fluency, very good. Very good. So dialect, okay. That could come under your accent as well. Okay, what else? Idioms, okay. All right. These are some really good ideas that are coming up. Good job. Very good idea. So let's just look at what could be the sub-skills of speaking. So when we talk about speaking, it could be nonverbal cues. Like when you're talking, just like you can see my expressions here, these are the nonverbal cues in the way I'm moving my hands. Everything is nonverbal. I'm communicating without the use of my language. Phonology, how do you pronounce certain words? Or, how do you pronounce certain sentences? Biological process, intelligibility, in lexical and grammatical resources. Yes, that's very important. Like you said before, yes, I'm getting more responses as well. Informal, informal speech, voice, tone. Yes, fluency, somebody, pointed that out earlier. Confidence, yes, functional language, and accuracy. So there are like a whole lot of sub-skills which are out there, and we will be talking about most of them in our session today. So before we actually move on towards the L2, which is the second language, let's just L1, which is our first language. Can anybody guess how many words do we produce per second in your L1, which is your first language? How many words do we produce in generally? Any ideas? 5 per second. Okay, that's very close. Anybody else? 6 words per second. So, okay, that's a lot per second. Okay. Let's look at more. 3 to 5 words. Yes, absolutely. You're correct. 2 to 3. According to the study in L1, we generally produce 2 to 3 words per second. So this is how L1 works. And how many L1 words are in an adult lexicon? Like, for suppose, how many words do you have in your vocabulary list in your first language? General idea, anybody? 6,000 to 10,000. Okay, that's a very good response. And anybody else? 6 to 10, 500 plus. Okay, that's quite low. I have never thought about that. Okay. So maybe this can be your takeaway, that how many words do we generally, we have in our first language? Okay, so I've got different responses coming in, 1,000 to 1,500. The closest was somebody now just said 20,000. So we can have, actually, according to the study, up to 30,000 words in our adult lexicon. So these many words we generally have when we are talking, and then we connect back. So now just take a look at how do we actually produce language when we talk. How do we actually do that? So what happens here, if you look at the diagram, it's from Levelet. It's about speech production. Generally, whenever we want to speak, there is a pre-verbal stage. In this stage, the idea is conceptualized in our head first. So, we think about the idea, it's still a pre-verbal stage. It hasn't, you haven't produced anything as such as, and then once you have generated the idea, everything is happening in your subconscious and in your conscious right now, in your head. And then again, you move on to the next stage, which is the formulator stage. And even right now, you're at the pre-verbal stage. You haven't produced any languages as yet. So you go back in your head and you think about what kind of a grammatical encoding you'll be looking at. This is what in your head in split second, which we don't even realize it. And phonological encoding, all of these things are happening in your head. And then you produce whatever you're going to say, everything is happening in your head, and then you put it into a phonetic plan, and then you produce your language. So this is how the L1 works in our head. Now let's take a look with this. Actually, it's pretty complex, and all of this happens in a split second. We don't even realize it. That idea is generated, and then we quickly work on the grammatical encoding and phonological encoding, and then the words get formed, the sentence get formed, and there you go, the speech is produced. This is how this all is happening over here, which is first two stages are the pre-verbal stages, and then you move on to to the third stage, which is you're actually articulating your sentences, you're talking about them, your whatever the ideas you have in your head. So as we move on, for the bilinguals, what actually happens here? It's pretty much the same, only difference is the formulator stage further gets divided into 3 different stages. And here we are talking about the competent L2 users. So in our context, we can say that L2 is English language and what is happening in our head. So we need to analyze that first before we move on. So just like in the first stage, the production of ideas is there, everything is there. Now we have words stored in subconscious, which we might have picked up while reading, listening, or maybe watching movies. It happens, they get stored in the subconscious. And then there are like certain words which which are there actively in your head, which you are familiar with already. And then you start picking up from those words, and then you put them in order in grammatical coding, and then you put them in order as per the phonology and everything. You start forming your sentences, and then then you start producing your lexicon. And then that is further divided into 3 stages. The gray one is here, the first stage, which is again the conceptualization of your ideas. The second stage, which is in yellow, that is then you're going to start thinking and working that how are you going to produce. And the third one is the production of language. So this is the DBOT model, which was adapted for bilinguals. So, but here one thing is to be noticed, that for the competent L2 users, that means the ones who already have quite a good command on second language. In our context, it could be English. Now, let's explore how to approach speaking skills and look at the classroom activities. Okay, so before we actually move on, speaking skill is one of the skill which has been neglected for quite some time. Generally in a classroom, our major focus is on the reading, writing, and to some extent is speaking is, oh, sorry, to listening, because the teacher is talking or the student is talking, there are like some activities are going on about listening as well. But speaking is something which has been neglected for quite some time. We do not pay that much focus, but until recently. But this component, this cannot actually be, ignored being a teacher. So how do you approach speaking skills whenever, you're holding classroom activities? Can anybody give me any ideas that whenever you have to hold, or do you actually hold speaking skills activities in the classroom, what do you generally use? I would love to hear from your responses. Yes. By brainstorming first. So do you actually brainstorm in L1 or L2? You need to tell me honestly what actually happens in the classroom in the real time. Simulations, okay. Pre-teach vocab, greetings, introduce yourself. Okay, great, great. So sharing thoughts, context. Okay, these are pretty good ideas over here. Very good. So do you actually consciously plan speaking activities? Do you give time to those speaking activities? So let's just take a look at the festival approach. So whenever we are creating a speaking activity or we are arranging one, what actually do we need to keep into our mind before what actually are we targeting? So the first one here, when we are talking about speaking activity, the first target is fluency and accuracy. I have taken quite a lot of responses about fluency, but none about accuracy. Can anybody say anything about what do you mean by accuracy especially when we're talking about speaking? Any ideas about fluency? It's already there. Accuracy, confident while speaking. So does it really address the accuracy part? Grammar and sentence structure, which is absolutely correct. Pronunciation accuracy. Wow, pronunciation is accuracy, really? Okay, it could be others as well. So let's just move on. Hello, Fitratullah. Yeah, I got your response. Correct use of language. So whenever you are in the classroom and you want to target fluency, being a teacher, what could be your aims? Any ideas? What could be your aim when you only want to target fluency? What do you actually want to target there? When you have to develop the fluency of speaking activity? Perfect use or articulation, maybe. Okay. Correct use of language. Okay. Correct use of language. Make them speak. Very well done. Brilliant. This is such a good response. To allow students to speak freely, do not immediately correct mistakes. Okay, excellent, because we are targeting fluency here. Express ourselves self in better way. Train them to use the language confidently, speak to the point, always speak to the point, okay? Really? And how about when you are targeting accuracy? What could be your aim as a teacher when you have to target accuracy in general? Encourage them to speak no matter how grammar they are. That could come under fluency. Pronunciation, correct tense, correct grammar. Very good, Rahil Chima. Okay, so now let's actually look at the aims. When we are targeting fluency, we would like students to continue speaking at a natural pace with clarity, relative ease. That means they're not hesitant when they're talking, and minimal interference. That means there's little or no interference from the teacher side. So this is our aim when we are targeting fluency only. So when we are talking about accuracy, to orally produce specific and error-free target sounds or language. So generally, when the students are talking, they're talking and they're talking about their ideas or their opinions, and the certain subject. They're sharing their own ideas. So what happens here that we start correcting the other errors which are not concerned or which are not your target sound for that particular lesson. So that we will look into in detail as well. The target sounds or the language for that particular lesson. That is your aim. Okay. So aim is again, and accuracy is same. Let's look at the errors. When we are targeting fluency, errors are permitted. Can anybody tell me why, when we are targeting fluency, why do we need to, let all the errors go? Why are they permitted? Why? Because we do not want to hinder while they're talking, and we want them to actually get that natural pace which they have in their L1. So this is where, yes, to encourage smooth speech, absolutely correct. And when it comes to accuracy, yes, again, errors are not permitted, but only for the target sounds or the language of that particular language are not permitted. So now let's take a look at the teacher and student interaction. When it comes to fluency, the teacher-student interaction is to minimum, little to none. And when it comes to accuracy, yes, teacher may have to intervene to correct, so in teacher interaction, it goes up a little over here. And accuracy exercises can be for, 5 to 10 minutes. So teacher won't really have to, intervene each and every time. Think only that you're best because you're presenting them. Okay. And duration for fluency. When you're targeting fluency, of course, you need to let them speak for a longer period of time because the production has to happen, the production of speech in L2. And that can only happen if, you give them ample time to talk about a certain topic or a subject with little or no errors. I mean, like you can let that go. But when you're talking about the accuracy, you can keep those pretty short, like for 5 minutes every day, where you're targeting pronunciation maybe, or you're targeting a certain grammar skill, or, it really depends on the aim of your lesson, that particular lesson. So you can keep that to the minimum when you are targeting, when you're actually planning your speaking activities. So the quantity, obviously, whatever you produce will be larger. And same is the case with accuracy. Yeah, the automatically, since, less time is there and you're only focusing on the target sounds or language, so the quantity would automatically will be smaller. So this is how the classroom works. Now I would like you to take a look at this book where the speaking activity has been designed, and two of them have been highlighted, pronunciation part and speaking. So we are going to look at how can we target accuracy and fluency at the same time, or how can we take both of them along. So let's just take a look at it. So this is the pronunciation part. See, in this particular activity, listen to the sentences 1 to 4 and underline the correct words in the rule. So rule is already given at the end. So here in the pronunciation part, probably students will have to listen to something, and then, they'll have to read the rule, and then they'll go over and then they will underline all the correct words according to the rule. So this is where the accuracy is being targeted. They are talking about the sentence stress in a certain sentence. And in this scenario, it's a present perfect sentences. And they're talking about we usually stress the main verb, which is auxiliary verb. If it is negative sentence, we add a word like just, and then we do not stress the main verb. So this is how it works. So that's here you are actually targeting the accuracy. So now, and just take a look at the speaking activity. You're going to find out which of your classmates is more addicted to technology. So they're going to talk about the idea, and they're going to give, their opinion, and they're actually going to discover and think of 6 questions to ask about people, what they have used recently. Use the topics below or your own ideas. So some keywords have been given already. And see, before beginning the speaking activity, the accuracy was already targeted. So how are you going to produce that language? Which tense? And how are you going to stress that the certain words in a particular sentence? So that has already been a practice, shorter period. And now comes the speaking activity. So now they'll get to practice actually whatever they have in their mind. Now you have actually made the students conscious that whenever they're producing or they're going to talk about it, they're going to keep those things, those rule in their mind before they actually start producing the language. That will automatically, initially it's going to be a little slow process, or you may have to intervene a little bit here and there, but eventually it's, they're going to get into this habit because they'll become conscious. So this is how it goes. And comes the second one is error correction, which we were just talking about it, and then we are going to build on that error correction. So now the fluency and accuracy have been targeted. How do we look at the error correction? Error means the L2 students. I want your responses. Do you think they failed to learn, or do you think the student is still learning? Whenever students make a mistake, what do you think? Do you think so they have failed to learn, or are they still in the learning process? Learning. Okay, pretty good. Anybody else? Is there anybody else who can give me another response? In learning process? Okay. Okay. Can it be both? Can we say both? Maybe you have practiced something and, yeah. So we can say it's more or less both things, because if you have practiced earlier, so you can say either you have failed to learn, but it's okay. You're still in the learning process. You will be making certain mistakes, and then you're going to, eventually get that accuracy. So corrective feedback, how do we give corrective feedback to the students? And there are certain approaches we are going to look at. And let's see how many of you are already in practice and how many you can actually take away from this session today. According to Lister and Ranta in 1997, there are 6 approaches. So one of them is explicit. Explicit is a direct response you give it to the students, that it's either wrong or right. That's it. So that's a very direct response, wrong or right. Then comes the recast. Can anybody tell me a recast? What do you think that recast is? Recast is something when we are repeating. For suppose if a student says that I goes to school. Let's just put it this way. So, an explicit feedback, the teacher will say, no, the sentence is wrong, grammatically wrong. I goes to school. So in a recast, the teacher's approach would be that she would listen to the sentence, and then she will, without saying anything, she'll just make the correction. I go to school every day, without even, making the student realize. She'll just stress on the word, I go to school every day. And third approach, corrective feedback, could be the elicitation. So what is actually elicitation? Now let's just take a look at this elicitation. So elicitation is when you start taking responses from the students actually. And how do you do that? The teacher may say, I goes to school every day, and then I go, she'll just stop over the I, and then she'll stop and she'll expect the students, the other students maybe, or the same student to correct that response. No, it's not I goes, I go to school every day. So that is when you're taking ideas from the students or fellow students or from the same students, you're eliciting. And comes the metalinguistic clues approach. So metalinguistic is when you can actually give them a grammatical rationale. You can tell them, okay, I, singular subject, and with this, particularly with I, and there are other singular subjects apart from he, she, and it, we do not add es with the verb. So, she can give them a rationale behind it, and she can ask the students to, reproduce the sentence again in a correct language. So that is where you're actually giving them clues, metalinguistic clues. So, you give them the idea, this is how the rule works, and, the student can later on correct that. And then comes the clarification request. This is something very tricky. So this child is saying that I goes to school every day. So, you ask them a question. Do you go to school? So had it been I goes to school, had it been that correct, she would have said, does I go to? So since the correct one is I go to school every day, the teacher is automatically going to ask the question in a clarification manner, like I go to school or do you go to school? So the child will be able to, yes, will be able to correct that sentence over there. So that is the clarification stage when you're actually, clarification request, when you actually ask the question and, and request them to, so that they get an idea, they need to correct that. And then the repetition. So repetition here is something, I goes to school. So teacher is going to stress on the word goes. It could be like this, I goes to school. So there are like 4 words. She can say, I goes to school, goes. So you see, you're repeating the sentence, and you have already pointed out that is actually, this approach is actually the mix of recast and repetition. And you're pointing out there's something wrong with goes here. So, they can actually make the correction. Okay, I go to school every day. So this is how the repetition, and then you can just point it out, and these that's where the child can actually be conscious about it and then correct it. So these are the corrective feedback types, different types. And how many of you are actually practicing all 6 or maybe 1 or 2 in your classrooms already? Like explicit, generally we repeat. Reformulation, I got one of the response already. So, and elicitation, do we, ask for these responses from the other students? Yeah, I usually do elicitation. Okay, great. So this is how it goes, yeah. Clarification, very well done, see? Elicitation, repetition, yeah, generally. So now you're familiar with more approaches, so you can use all of these and incorporate in your lesson. So now let's just take a look at this example. He goes to school. So the feedback is he go to school. The feedback would be he goes to school. So, and then, he go to school, verb, form, tense, teacher, will be actually asking the student to correct this. What could be the second one? Which approach could be the second one? I almost do all randomly, excellent. Okay, I'm just checking that the second one, he go to school and teacher has actually, given the clues of verb, form, and tense, and the child is expected to correct it. What do you think? Metalinguistic. Excellent. Very well done. So you got that right. Very good. Very good. So this is how it goes. After, so fluency and accuracy have been, we have discussed error correction. We have looked at it, and then comes the student talk time, STT. Very, very important. And comes the teacher talk time as well. Let's take a look at STT. So the the first thing we're going to look at is maximizing the material, which is right at the top, maximizing the material.